and explain the context of it. But what I'm going to do is just give you a sense, first of all, of what we do know, and this is based on really extremely recent research over the last 10 or 15 years about the sounds of Greek music. And also, at the end of, I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes, and then I'm going to play a 15-minute video so that you can actually hear some of the reconstructed sounds of ancient Greek music as were played in a concert in 2017. Well, first I'm just going to talk very simply, you don't have to know any ancient Greek for this, about the sounds of music in ancient Greece. And I'm going to start by talking about what do we mean by music? Because a lot of people say ancient Greek music is lost, but what they tend to mean is that the melodies are lost. You're going to see that that's not true. The fact is the rhythm was always there. And here we have a lyric that survives from ancient Greece. I've translated it into English, into isosyllabic English. In other words, the English words have the same syllables as the original Greek words. And this is a fragment of ancient lyric. And remember, lyric, the word lyric, comes from words played to the lyre. That's what lyric means. And there's a vase painting there of a man playing the lyre. He may or may not be this character Timotheus of Miletus, who was the most avant-garde musician of his day. But Timotheus, in any case, was one of the ancient Greek poet-musicians who left some of these lyrics, which survive obviously only in words. And this is one of them. It's 5 lines. I don't croon the old way. My songs are new and better. See the old king, Kronos, ousted. Now the young Zeus is the ruler. Get away, old-fashioned music. Now, it's a strange thing, isn't it, for a pop star, and he was a pop star in his day, probably playing to audiences of thousands, incredibly popular. He became incredibly wealthy. We know quite a lot about this character. And his songs were still being sung, we know, 600 years after he died, because we have an inscription from Arcadia in Greece which tells us that they were singing Timotheus' songs. Can you imagine the Beatles still being sung in 600 years' time? This man was a superstar musician of his day. And one of the reasons was he was innovative, as he tells us in this snippet of a song. It's actually quite an ancient Greek thing to say something about the music you play or sing in the words that you actually compose. So it's a bit like as if we were to say, I'm going to sing and praise the Lord in C minor. Here he is doing something like by saying, my music is new and better. He's taking the myth of Zeus, the king of the gods, ousting his father. This is Greek mythology. Kronos was the original king, sometimes known as Saturn. That's the Latin form. And he was pushed out of heaven by Zeus, and Zeus is the ruler. And Timotheus is saying, look, my new music is ruling now. The old music is gone. Get away, old-fashioned muse. So I've italicized the last 3 lines because they give us a rhythm. In Greek, topalai den chronos arkon honeos theos basileue, apito mu sapalaya. See the old king Kronos ousted, now the young Zeus is the ruler. Get away, old-fashioned music. And that's in a rhythm which was known as the Ionic rhythm, which is short, short, long, long, short, short, long, long. So there's music. There's already music embedded in these words. We already have a rhythm. It was called Ionic because it was thought to have come from Ionia, which was the eastern part of the Greek world. It was the coast of modern Turkey, Asia Minor. And Timotheus came from there. He came from Miletus, which is in Asia Minor. And he brought with him avant-garde sounds. We were told his melodies were completely original and different and used many more notes than previous ones. He played, amongst other things, on an 11-stringed kithara. So this instrument here is a concert version of a lyre. Lyre is a smaller thing. This is a concert lyre, a much bigger one. It's not quite as big as a cello, but I've lugged one around, a reconstructed one. It's almost as heavy. And the kithara, of course, is the word which underlies our word guitar. So here you have a pop singer singing lyrics to a kithara. And of course, a lot of these lyrics were love poetry. In this case, it's not a love poetry, a love poem. It's a poem about the importance of his innovative music. But in it, you have these rhythms, these ionic rhythms, which were considered by the ancient Athenians, where he came from Miletus to Athens, to be indicative of exotic oriental sounds. It was like an Eastern drum beat, da-da-dum, dum, da-da-dum, dum. And so they call these ionic sounds the sounds that you would hear ecstatic devotees of the great goddess mother Cybele in Asia Minor would be playing on their drums, and that's how they heard that sound. So here he's already introducing a new rhythm into Greek music. Now, what about melody then? There is melody, of course, there was melody. They talk a lot about it. I mean, ancient music was so important. It was so important to the Greeks. It was important in their religion. It was important in their festivities of all kinds. And we learn a lot about the theory of melody and the theory of harmonia, which is their word for what we call harmony. But there's also one other thing, and that is that, if I can get this thing to work, this music had a notation. And this is an amazing thing for ancient Greek scholars, that we have notated documents. Now, a document can either be on stone. Here is a marble column. Here is just two sides of the same column, so you can read the words across it. It's currently in Copenhagen. It's about 2.5 foot high. And it has beautiful Greek writing on it. So this comes from about 150 AD. And it begins with a statement which tells us that it was composed by Sikelos. So Sikelos is the author, and he says, this is an image on stone. The first words in Greek say, Sikelos has placed me here as a long-lasting symbol of eternal memory. And the word for long-lasting in Greek, polychronion, is a bit of a pun, because chronos means a beat. There's many beats in this, because as soon as you've read those first, in fact, what looks at the first 5 lines of Greek, the stone bursts into song. It starts to sing, because there's musical notation above the rest of it. So I'm going to show you a transcription of that. And what we have in Greek are the words hoson zis phenu, while you're alive, shine. Don't let your mood decline. We only have life for a short time. Death demands that we all go. So that's what those 4 lines say in Greek, hoson zis phenu, miden holos su lupu, prosoligon esti to zin, to telos hochronos apeti. It's rhyming. It's AABB rhyme scheme. 150 AD. And above these words in Greek, there are these little symbols. So if you look, about the large symbols are, of course, Greek letters. Hoson begins with hoson zis phenu across the top. But above the omicron, omicron, of course, everybody knows what that is nowadays. Above the omicron, the very first O, there is a little C, which is a sigma. It's what's called a lunate sigma, an S, which is in the shape of a moon. That is an S. And above the next omicron is a zeta, a Z. It's the same as our Z. It was a zeta in the Greek alphabet. Difference is, of course, a zeta was not the last letter in the Greek alphabet. Omega was. Zeta was higher up. So, in fact, these are alphabetic letters, and we have all the evidence we need to know exactly what they indicate in terms of pitch. And it was a very simple principle. The higher in the alphabet, the higher the note. So you start with an alpha, that's a high note. You go down, beta, gamma, delta. But unlike our system, where it's a tone per note, you had 3 letters per tone. So alpha, beta, gamma all indicated a tone or part of a tone, a semitone or a microtone. So it could have been a quarter tone or a third tone. And I'll go into talk about that in a bit. So what we have here then is a sigma followed by a zeta. Sigma, of course, is lower in the alphabet than zeta. And in fact, that is a 5th of a rise. Da, dum. So we know that begins hoson. The next word, zis, as long as you're alive, zis, is another zeta. So it's the same, the hoson zis. Then it goes down to a kappa, which is 2 tones below, fe, up to iota, e, zeta again, e, fe. So on that diphthong, there are 3 notes, fe, and then back to the iota, no. So we have the song. Above the zeta, the first zeta there's a bar, which tells us that is twice as long, as it were. If the first element is a crotchet, that is a dotted crotchet. So sorry, not a dotted crotchet. If the first element is a quaver, that's a crotchet. Above the third element, the second zeta there is a bent line, and we're told that would be the 3 times as long, so that would be the dotted crotchet. So we have a rhythm there. Ha, son, zis, ha, son, zis. And we can go through the whole thing and get the whole tune and transcribe it, and this is what that tune tells us. Ha, son, zis, fenu, miden holo silipu, prosoligon estitazin, totelos ochronos apeti. Which, that sounds like Western music already. This is 150 AD. That could be Gregorian song from the 9th or 10th century AD, which is where most musicologists think Western music began. Well, clearly it began earlier. It began in Europe, European music. And this is an indication of the kind of music they were singing then in 150 AD. What's fascinating for a classicist about this is how the Greek language is naturally pitched. You have pitch accents which tell you that the voice goes up and down. So the word for beautiful, for example, kalos, the voice rose on the second element. Now it's become a stress accent, so modern Greek would say kalos, and they'll stress it. But in the ancient Greek, they could actually stress another element of the word. So let's take a longer word, agathos. The stress was on the first element, aga, a, and then the voice went up in pitch on the accented bit, agathos. So they had a great ear for melodic sound because their very language incorporated it. And we're told by a grammarian of the 1st century AD that the compass was within the interval of a fifth. So you could get, kalos, you could go up a fifth as that tune does. Hoson, as that one does. Now, what's interesting is that over each of the pitched elements here, in nearly every case, the melody follows the pitch change. So take the word, for example, at the very end, lupu, which means be sad, don't be sad. Lupu. It's a circumflex, and a circumflex accent over the oo indicated exactly that. When they said the word, they'd say lupu, oo. They would use that up and down sound. And that's the same with the very last syllable, e. It actually mimics beautifully the circumflex accent there. But if you look a little bit within it, let's say the penultimate word, chronos, which means time, or chronos, you look at that, D-E, C sharp, it goes up on that element which is naturally pitched in the language. So this is a beautiful demonstration of how the natural pitch of the language was imitated by composers, as Siculus does here. So what I've done is I've translated this isosyllabically so you can sing it yourselves. While life lasts, shine bright, don't let anything you benight. We don't have life all along, my friend. To all our plans, time decrees an end. And you can hear there's another principle of composition at work, as well as that matching the natural syllables in the natural pitches in the Greek syllables. There's the principle of, if it's up high, it's bright. While life lasts, shine bright, it's all up there. Don't let anything you be night. So the first time it goes down, actually, is at the end of that, the word lupu, which means to be sad in Greek. And then it moves a bit faster. We don't have life all along, my friend. It moves into shorter chronoi, time elements. And the word chronos is there, time. To all our planned time decrees an end. And you have that kind of dejected cadence at the end. So there's also that principle of mimesis, they called it, imitation. The words imitate the feeling. Siculus was incredibly proud of this. It used to be thought that it was an epitaph, that this was because those kinds of stelae, as they're called, stone objects with inscriptions very often, are dedications to someone who's died. At the end of this one, it says Siculus is alive. That's a formula which means that the person who's dedicated it is not the dead person. So it was thought it was an epitaph maybe for his dead wife or something of that kind. But it's not the kind of sentiment, is it, that you're going to express in an epitaphic dedication. You're not going to say, have a good time, you only live once, wife is dead. No, I don't think that's what he meant. I think he was very proud of having written this piece, and he decided to inscribe it. There's a lot going on, which I can't even go into, but it's a very cleverly written piece of music. So that's 150 AD. What about the classical period of ancient Greece, 5th century BC, the time when the great tragedians were writing, when history was invented by Herodotus, when you had the beginnings of philosophy with Socrates and so on? Well, we're very, very fortunate to have a scrap of papyrus, which represents a tiny portion of a play that we know, Euripides' play Orestes from 408 BC. So this is 5th century BC, and in Orestes, the play by Euripides, it's the story of the son of Agamemnon who went to Troy, who defeated the Trojans and went back to Argos, where he was killed by his wife Clytemnestra, who had been having an affair in the meantime. And Orestes, their son, was ordered by the god Apollo to kill his mother. So it's this vendetta story. And in Euripides' play, Orestes, it begins with Orestes being chased by the furies of Clytemnestra, so these kind of black-winged creatures, the demons of vengeance. And he is either kind of in a catatonic state, or he's jumping up and down and aiming a bow and arrow at these figures that he sees in his mind. So he's mad at the beginning, and the chorus sing, "I lament for you, poor Orestes, your mother's blood makes you jump up and down like a bacchant." Now, this has got lots of holes in it. You can see that's a 2-inch square piece of papyrus with holes in it. And it can be transcribed, it has been on the right, with the words, "I lament for you, your mother's blood makes you leap up," it says in Greek. But, of course, only what you get is snippets. And also the snippets show, because it uses the particular letters, that there are quarter tones. So the word "I lament" in Greek, katolophuromai, we just have the last 3 notes of that, and you can see it's an F, slightly below an F, and then an E. So F, a quarter tone lower, la da dum, da da da. We can't really pitch it out, we can't hear it. Very difficult for us to do quarter tones. But you can hear the basic principle at work. If you're saying "I lament," it's dejected, so you're going down. And then it goes up again to that quarter tone, materos, your mother, and then there's a gap. But the next thing we have is "makes you leap up like a bacchant," someone, a devotee of Bacchus, and you can see it's gone up nearly a 5th. So you can already see, you can work out, even from these scraps, the principles that are at work of trying to make the words imitate, the melody imitate the words by jumping up in some way when the words jump up, and by being dejected when they say "I lament." Now, Greek tragedy has these choruses where they will sing a stanza and they will repeat the rhythm exactly in a second stanza. This comes from the second stanza in this particular play. We've got the first stanza. So what I did was put these two together, first and second stanzas, to see what we could work out. And these red boxes are the ones where we have the notes from the papyrus. And if you look at the 3rd line down, you see the words katiketeuomai. So it goes up, that's what it tells us. But the same word is repeated, katiketeuomai, and we have the end of it, but as a different register. Da, da, da. Greek musical theory tells us about these different registers, and what I realized was you could get the same pattern, da 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 da, ba da 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 da, for the same word at the different register. And working on that kind of basis, I managed to reconstruct what I think this may well have been musically. It's what classical scholars do with words. I thought we could do that with notes as well. We're also given a fascinating commentary by an ancient source, we don't know who tells us that at a certain point, at the bottom there, when you have the red box and the red notes, they actually used what we would call Sprechstimme. They didn't sing it, they shouted the words, "Alas for his troubles, po moktorm." So we can start to reconstruct what it may have sounded like, and you will hear it in a minute. There are also some other little red notes, especially in that first bar of the last line, which give us what the instrumental accompaniment did. I mean, it's amazing, this bit of papyrus. It gives us instrumental notes, and we can see that there you have a C, F, B, which is a seventh, as it were, moving on to a sixth, the B to the A. This is very similar to our harmonic sensibility. So this is 5th century BC. The thing that put musicians off for centuries from thinking that ancient Greek music had anything to do with us were these quarter tones. But if you look at how the quarter tones work, they're almost always passing notes onto a tonal center. So once you have a recognition that this was tonal music and it used harmonic sounds which are not a million miles away from our harmonic understanding, then you start to realize that this must have been the basis of the kind of music that goes on to become, after the whole of the Roman Empire and Gregorian and other musical traditions, becomes what eventually ends up as Western music. So I think this pushes the tradition of Western music back by about 1,500 years from what was thought to be the beginnings in the 9th or 10th century AD. A few words about instruments. There were considered to be two main instruments. One was the aulos, which was the double pipe. We used to think one was a drone and the other was, but you can see from the guy's fingers here, he's playing melodies on both. And we now have some fantastic pipers who can replicate this. And we have about 20 pipes which survive from ancient graves and so on. So some have been perfectly replicated so that we have their holes in the right place and we can get their sounds as authentically as possible. This is how they would have been in a theatre chorus, in a circle around the piper. And one other thing I'm just going to play you is Ethiopian singers who play to something called the krar, which of course is a word also descended from the kithara. They strum their krar, and the way they tune it, if you listen to the top notes, there's a note which is slightly off beat, which is off pitch. It's a quarter tone, perhaps lower than we would expect it to be, but it doesn't stop their singing being tonal. You can hear perfectly tonal music, but with that rather strange sound at the top to which the string is tuned. And I would say that's a good parallel for the kind of thing we're looking at when we see these quarter tone. In fact, they're a third tone. We have very precise indications by the mathematician Ptolemy as to exactly what they were. They were around a third of a tone, those passing notes that I was talking about. So I'm now going to play a 15-minute video called Rediscovering Ancient Greek Music, in which I hope some of these ideas will come together. This was recorded a few years ago in Oxford, and at the end of it we get the performance of, or a performance. I can't say I'm entirely happy with it because it's by a choir and it's too choral, but apart from that, I think it's got the right kind of notes and melodies and harmonies, and it's accompanied by a great piper, Barnaby Brown. And so I will just now end by playing this recording. This is a sound that hasn't been heard for 2,000 years. This is ancient Greek music as we think it was actually sung around 400 BC.
I'm an associate professor of classics at Oxford University, and for the last 5 years I've been concentrating on reconstructing the sounds of ancient Greek music. We're rehearsing in Jesus College Chapel for a concert that we're going to be putting on later in the Ashmolean Museum. The singers in the choir are scholars of ancient music, and they're going to be accompanied by replicas of original instruments that were used in ancient Greece. What we call Greek poetry is mainly words that were intended to be sung, very often with the accompaniment of instruments. So the Greek poetry of the ancient world, this was all sung to music. People think the music is lost. I don't believe it is. We have the rhythms, we have the instruments, and we have the melodies. Put that together and you have the music.
Okay.
And can we just say, tinumenai dikan, tinumenai ponu?
Yeah.
So instead of...
What we know most about are the rhythms, because they're inscribed in the meter. The metrical systems of ancient Greece were very precise, and they were based on the language. The Greeks conventionally thought that the words of their language consisted of either long or short syllables. So we might say that a long syllable followed by two short ones would sound like da, 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 da. So you get a rhythm such as the dactylic hexameter, da, 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 da. And that is the rhythmical basis that we can use when we're reconstructing the sound of Homeric music. What we needed to do was to bring together the other elements, which were the melodic sound of ancient song. And the source material for the melodies is about 60 very precious ancient documents which have been preserved on stone, such as the Delphic Paean by Athenaeus, which is one that we will be singing in the concert. And that has what we might call 80 or 90 bars of music, melodic notation preserved that allows us to recreate and sing that piece. One of the most exciting things that has happened over the past decade is the discovery and recreation of replicas of instruments. So, for example, there's a aulos, which is a double pipe that is in the Louvre, which is in such good condition that we can replicate it absolutely precisely and get wonderful pipers to play it. And that gives us an indication of the sound of the instrument and the tuning. The other is the stringed instruments. The kithara is the concert version of the lyre. We have some wonderful ancient vase depictions from which we have actually created replicas, and one of which will be used by Stefan Hagel in the concert. And then it's a question of working out how the instrument was played.
So this is an aulos, or a double pipe, and it's made of deer bone, and the reeds are made of Mediterranean cane, grows everywhere like a weed, and it's a single tube which you delicately scrape and heat up and squeeze and clamp. It's quite wide bore compared with later double pipes. The other instrument we play from maybe 2 or 3 centuries later is made of wood and has a narrower bore. This one is a powerful instrument for outdoors, accompanying 50 singers in the temple or in a dance. So the tones that it produces, it's fascinating. They clearly didn't want a great big range because, as you can see, they're similar length, and they basically are one note apart. So you've got one going la da 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 da, and the other one going la da 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 dum, and that means there's lots of overlap, and you can play games with the dissonance between the two pipes that you wouldn't be able to do if they were offset. These instruments give us a range. You know, you can't. It's basically an F sharp, a little bit below an F sharp, at an octave. And that is, it lies beautifully with the other ancient evidence. So it really supports the reconstructions of the notations. So yes, when I accompany the Orestes chorus with this, we're able to play it at the same pitch it was written. It took a long time to figure out how to do that because the two lowest notes aren't available on a single pipe. So by switching the F sharp and the G between the two pipes, I can actually play the melody. So there we are. I'm sharing the la da la da 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 dum. I can play the bottom note here, and I can play the next note there. But I don't have both of those notes on both pipes, so it's got to be shared.
One of the most important things I tried to convey in my conducting has been to channel and express the contrasting moods and contrasting emotional implications of what they are singing, which is very exciting because tonight we have a big performance coming up in the Ishmaeli Museum where we'll have not just academic colleagues who are very knowledgeable about what we are actually singing, but also BBC Radio 3 who are going to record our performance for the early music show.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this unique event. Essentially, we classicists study poetry, and all this poetry was composed with music. When Homer was composing the Iliad and the Odyssey, he composed with a four-stringed lyre. One can reconstruct four notes, which we think were probably the basis of Homeric music.
This is the earliest music that we think we can reconstruct, the music of Homer from around 700 BC. And Stefan Hagel is taking the four notes that are at the basis of ancient Homeric music and improvising based on the Homeric text. What Stefan has reproduced is a simple and fairly repetitive melody. You can hear the underlying metrical, rhythmical dactyls, the da, 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 and you hear the melody, and at the end of each line, a kind of instrumental flourish just on the strings of the kithra. The second piper is Callum Armstrong, who is an expert on the aulos and is going to demonstrate an improvisation on the instrument. We have some sense of the notated music that an aulos would have played, but essentially an expert piper like Callum needs to try and produce whatever sounds he can on the instruments that we have. And so here he's improvising and showing the kind of sounds that the two pipes together can make. So you'll notice that the techniques that are used by the pipers is circular breathing, where they're breathing in normally through their nose, they're holding the breath in their cheeks and they're pushing it out, and at the same time they are taking breaths in through their nose so that they can make a continuous sound, a bit like bagpipes, but doing it with their own bodies. The most exciting development in reconstructing ancient music is reconstructing the melody. We do have documents with melodic notation that was devised around the 5th century BC, including this wonderful stone from Delphi, which has a paean, which is a hymn of praise in honour of Apollo. And on the stone, we have the words of the text that was sung, and above the text, we have these little symbols, which is the vocal notation, which tells us the precise melodic notes to which those words were sung. Now, there are some gaps, and I have filled in those gaps using only the notes that are available to us from the rest of the stone. So the final piece is a chorus from Euripides' Orestes, in which the young Orestes is being chased by the furies of his mother, these spirits of vengeance. This is perhaps the most exciting piece of music that survives from antiquity. It's on a papyrus, about 2 inches square. There's Greek writing on it, which is the text of Euripides' Orestes, a chorus from that, a few lines of it. Above that writing, there are these symbols which are the melodic notes to which that text was set. So the finale of this performance is the reconstructed version of the chorus from Euripides' Orestes.
Thank you very much, everyone. That's the end of my presentation, and you'll be hearing some real music soon.